Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Sakline, Lindsay Kline.
Hello, everyone. This is Lindsay Kline with Sakline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. I have an awesome guest with me today, Mark de la Chapelle. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I did it.
Thanks
I
for
had to
having me on,
practice
Lindsay.
that a few
Appreciate
times. So, Mark is the founder and CEO of Vertex Materials, and he's also an aerospace integrator. Mm-hmm. And him and I met through a CEO peer group and ended up having a face-to-face meeting. Mm-hmm. And Mark, you're one of those people that I just immediately gravitated to because you're so smart and you have just a wealth of knowledge. So I loved getting to know you, and I'm so excited that you're on the show.
So kind.
So tell viewers and listeners a little bit about what you do, how you got started, and what it is you want to talk about today. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on it.
No problem. Well, I'm first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate this. It's a cool opportunity. I've been blessed to work with some truly brilliant people.
Nice.
And on top of them being brilliant, they've been willing to teach a younger guy. In college, I studied finance and started to fall in love with with astrophysics.
I did not know this.
So I needed an elective.
That's like my arena.
Yeah, love finance a little bit. Started as accounting and fell asleep in class a little too much. So switched to finance, and around my senior year, I had to take an elective course. So I took an astrophysics course and started falling in love with stuff that Kepler taught, a little bit of what Kerr taught, and some Einstein stuff. And called my dad and said, "Dad, I want to study physics." And he said, thou shalt not. Finished up with finance and started off in the work world. And,
how funny.
I called every aerospace company that I could in a 100-mile radius of Dallas. And one of them called me back, said, we need some help in sourcing, some help in inventory. So joined out there with Exos Aerospace in Greenville. And what an experience. It's they were a small payload integrator. And after doing some of the sourcing stuff, I begun doing this algorithmic approach where I would do a mathematical scoring system, and never quite finished it at Exos, but realized that just sourcing in general could use more of an objective approach to make sure that you're getting stuff on time. Make sure you're getting stuff at the best quality. Make sure you're getting stuff that does exactly what you're trying to do.
And that's what your company does now, right?
That's exactly what the company does at Vertex. Yes, ma'am.
So that's really interesting that wasn't necessarily the role you were going for, but it ultimately led to what you're doing today.
Yeah, definitely did not think I was going to wind up here. One of the terms that we used at Exos is that I was a younger guy who was just rocket drunk. I had to get involved. I couldn't be on the sideline. So
that's really interesting. So in a nutshell, what would you say your company does for business owners?
Vertex optimizes purchasing processes. Every large company, especially engineering firms, aerospace companies, places where you make stuff. And you can't buy it on Amazon.
So you can help anyone that makes anything.
Anyone who makes stuff, anyone who buys stuff.
And you mentioned when we had talked that you created some sort of algorithm.
Correct. Yes.
And so explain that and what it does.
So what I call it is the subjective analysis buyer's algorithm. And it essentially, it scores that you're buying what you should be buying. It can score up to 144 different variables. And it's essentially just an average of a whole bunch of factors with different weights.
So I have a client that has a printing company, and they have a lot of printing equipment.
Sure.
Is that something that you could help with? Is
that
an example?
Absolutely, yes. I haven't subjected printing equipment to the algorithm yet. So far, I've done mostly the industrial sector.
Okay.
And I'm working on doing janitorial sector and consumables this summer.
Interesting. So give us an example, I guess, of a company that you have helped and what, I guess, their stats were before you got there and then what you did for them.
No problem. Because of some contracts, I'm not sure I can really say exactly who it was.
General terms.
Interior design, manufacturer, they were struggling with lead time stuff, especially during the COVID nonsense and craziness about how the supply chain was just flipped upside down. Their lead times were in the months, and we were able to redo the warehouse, somewhat redesign the operation side of it to make sure that when they were picking things, they weren't going as far. They were utilizing the forklift the right way, getting battery storage where it needed to be. And I think we decreased the lead time by about 80%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty remarkable.
Well, but see, at the same time, I can't entirely take credit for it because when I think Vertex works best when I compare with the operations team, because your purchasing guy can do more important things than buy toilet paper, than buy pallets.
Which is a good segue into what we were going to talk about today, which
absolutely.
is, and you gave me a little quote, and I forget what it is now, so give it to me about that.
Well, I can't remember it exactly. I read it in this book. I used to have to commute a bit to do the Rocket stuff, so I did a lot of stuff on Audible, and this guy had a quote. He said, if the 95 Bulls had 5 Michael Jordans, they'd go 0-82. You need a center who can rebound, you need a guy to play defense, you need a guy who can pass, you need all of it. So the quote essentially said, let the guys who shoot, let them shoot. Let the guys who pass, let them pass. And the guys who rebound, let them rebound. Everyone's a role player.
Right.
Like even Phil Jackson said everybody's a role player. So essentially, you somewhat need to be big enough to know how small you are.
Right.
And let the guys who are good at what they do, let them do it. One reason that I thought Exos was so interesting is we all seem to pass the baton really well. Know where your space is. Yeah.
No room for ego, really. No. I mean, obviously there's ego.
You try.
But the more you can put that aside to let the guys that are really excel in a certain area, because I can see exactly what you're saying. But how does that apply to a small business owner that maybe can't afford to outsource everything? Like, what's the best way to strategically go about that as a small business owner grows?
Goodness, that's a hard question to answer. And I think if I could answer that, then I probably wouldn't still be in business. I'd be sitting on a beach drinking something cold. You know what I mean? But it's a great question.
Yeah, because that's actually the place I am in right now as a small business owner. I'm about to hire my 3rd employee. So it's okay. I can't necessarily go afford right now to hire a technology person. Technology is certainly not my strong suit.
I know what you mean.
But then, where do I weigh the cost benefit there? Do you have any suggestions for how to sort of weigh when is the time right to go get that person?
Well, whether or not you want to admit it, everything runs in dollars and cents.
Yes.
And that's just reality. I would say the first thing you can do, automate what you can automate.
Yes.
Especially in invoicing, accounting. There's all kinds of great...
And we can help with that.
There's all kinds of great accounting software and stuff. Taxation software that'll at least get the ball close to the goal line. Just so that you can focus... I think everyone needs the ability to focus on revenue generation with as much energy as possible.
And you're specifically speaking to the owners.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Now, are there cases where that may not be what the owner should be doing? Have you seen that? Where, like you were talking about the Michael Jordans, okay, maybe there's someone that owns a company, but maybe is not necessarily the best person to be the revenue generator.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of to follow the sports metaphor for revenue generation is offense. Defense matters. You don't want to look like Texas Tech football with Mike Leach, scoring 63 and losing by 7. I don't know. I guess objectively speaking, it's I'm more in favor of the growth mindset, but you should also cut the fat where you can. Don't be wasteful or anything.
Right. Absolutely. So when you go in to consult with companies and you're dealing with companies that make things, how do you tackle that? Do you have a process or
absolutely
sort of a checklist that you're going through, or how would you go about
the first thing I do is I sit down and I open up my notebook and I say, please don't mind my scribbling. I'll be listening, but I'll be scribbling. What pains you? What is your biggest pain? And almost always that ends up being a walk through the production facility. And we just point at stuff, talk about it. And what I think Vertex does best is that mathematically we'll use a wealth of data and a wealth of knowledge to track something down that, in truth, the customer could probably do themselves, but it'd just be a huge waste of time.
Interesting.
It'd be a huge waste of time. Like a specific type of automation for small part storage, or a specific type of shelving that'll be closer to the end user, or battery storage, so you don't have to keep charging your computer all day, stuff like that. But people often don't realize how much time is being wasted, and labor is wildly expensive.
Oh yes, it's the most expensive in most cases.
Yeah, the overhead. Yeah. It's wildly expensive.
You're right.
So easing the strain. I normally just try to ease the strain.
And I'm guessing that a lot of what you're doing for business owners is offering them an outside perspective, sort of new eyes on something that they look at very closely every day and may not see just because they're too close to it. Would you say that's true?
Somewhat, absolutely. And then a lot of times customers actually do know what they need, which is interesting.
But they just need help executing it?
They need help finding it. And then recently I've been able to set up a store platform. And whenever we find something that works, we automate it so that their purchasing guy can focus on something that matters.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Because you shouldn't be fixing the same problem every week.
Right.
Or every day.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
We're smarter than this.
Right. Absolutely. How do you get much resistance? Because a lot of times a business owner will get on board with something, but the employees are resistant to change. Do you encounter that a lot?
Not from my role. I used to. I'm sure the operations guy does on his end.
So they just don't tell you.
Yeah. Most of the time I don't hear about it.
Because a lot of times you got, the new guy coming in as a consultant or what have you, and everyone's like, oh, great, we got the consultant here to tell us what to do, So, but you don't necessarily hear those grumblings.
No, often not.
Is there anything that you do to try to ease some of that?
If I can't help, I try to narrow that down in the first 5 minutes and say, hey, sometimes I've gone in and say, hey, you guys are really doing pretty great.
Nice.
I'm not sure I can really help you that much. But if I can't pair with the business, I'm not really sure that I'm helping them anyway. We should be on the same team.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So what would you say to business owners out there that have some kind of business that make things, as you describe? What sort of things could they look at to say if they might be more efficient?
Have you created process everywhere? Painstakingly so.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
Everything should probably be documented.
Everything. Like, how detailed do you get with that? Like, this is where we order pins. I mean, how granular do you get?
Painstakingly so.
Interesting.
You probably need an old guy with a clipboard that everyone hates. Truly.
And what does that do? Because on the face, it looks like that actually becomes more inefficient. But is it sort of, okay, we become really inefficient as we document to become more efficient later?
So I'll use a metaphor. I love metaphors. In the aerospace industry, this is something that some of the guys I had worked with at Exos used to say. So imagine every time that you drove to, get food at the store, that when you got there, your tires fell off and you had to put your tires back on every single time you drove your car. Or the engine blew up and you had to rebuild a carburetor. Or the pressurization snapped. Or the oil valve broke or something. I mean, how ridiculous would this be to do this maintenance task over and over and over? So essentially at the beginning of aerospace, this is what happened. The rocket would be destroyed on re-entry somehow. And then people started doing re-entry smarter and you could reuse the rocket. So you actually started doing what you were meant to be doing, which is taking payloads to space, not just building rockets all the time.
Right.
So where can you take the maintenance tasks and teach your machine and or computer and or labor force to do it in a more efficient, outsourced, cheaper, automated way? So if your business is, making coffee, let's actually make coffee. Let's not waste all our time buying something that, buying the bags to put the coffee in to sell it.
Right.
I mean, come on, this is 2021.
Right.
We're smarter than this.
Right.
But unfortunately, what happens is you get so in the weeds of doing your job that you don't have time.
Right. No, I completely understand that. And I'm a big proponent of what you're talking about because I want to have my company set up in such a way that if any one of us, including me, were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, somebody could step immediately into that person's shoes and know where everything's at. So I'm big on the documentation. Goal. It is. But it comes down to what you were talking about is documenting everything well.
Well, and it's painstaking.
Yes.
And it's exhausting.
It is.
Truly.
You're right.
It's exhausting and it's not fun.
but at the forefront, right? It's not always that way, would you say? I mean, obviously, if you
do it right, you shouldn't have to do it again.
Right.
And, a revision is a lot easier than writing an entire document yourself.
Exactly.
But I think automation is the future.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Smarter, not harder. That's kind of something that I preach to people. And goodness, I hope I live it my own life. I try to.
Nice. Well, do you have any other last thoughts that you'd like to share with viewers or listeners?
One thing that's been kind of a breakthrough recently that, and I wish I could claim this for myself. A lot of times, I think that I'm going into a meeting to help a customer, and really a customer is helping me.
Interesting.
Well, we should all be learning from each other.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, now that I think about it, that happens often with my clients. I learn a lot from them.
But what's been helpful for me is I've started taking Sunday evening has been my thing, but there should be a time for each of us. I don't care if you're a mom with a couple kids, if you're a bus driver to school, or if you're running a multi-billion-dollar firm. Take a couple steps back. 15 minutes for me, it's like 10, if I'm being honest, because my phone will buzz and I lose focus. But are we actually paying attention to what we're doing from an objective sense?
That's good.
Are we actually thinking about what we're doing? Or are we just doing it because we've been told to, or we have to? But are we actually thinking about what we're doing? And in my little 10-minute session on my yoga mat or whatever, one thing that I've come up with is a stop doing list.
Interesting.
And it's two things. It's don't drink caffeine late and go to bed. But come on, like are we really paying attention to what we're doing?
Yeah,
and I'm really preaching to myself, but
right. It reminds me of that book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, where they talk about the example of the whirlwind, the stuff that comes at you every day.
I've not heard of this.
It's a really interesting analogy, because the whirlwind being the stuff that happens in your business all the time that you get caught up in, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with where you're wanting to go with your big goals, And so it's just talking about how you have to be cognizant that, yes, you're going to have to deal with the whirlwind. It's running a business.
It is reality.
But you got to make sure that the whirlwind is not consuming 100% of your time.
That's well said.
So it's, kind of another way of saying that, look at the things that you really need to be focused on and make sure some portion of your time is focused on that.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. Like, I always enjoy talking to you. I feel like a sponge. I want to be a sponge around you and learn all I can.
Thank you. You're very kind.
You're very talented. So,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tell listeners where they could find Vertex Materials. How can they reach you?
VertexMaterials.com, thevertexstore.com. I'm trying to upload SKUs quarterly, and my cell is 817-941-1464.
All right. You're a brave man putting your cell phone out there.
I hope I can get back and help out. Well, it's business is fun. And it should be.
All right. Well, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And of course, always you can reach me, Lindsay Kline, at sakline.com. Email info@sakline, SAKLINE.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And Mark, it's been a pleasure. And until next time, bye.
Buy the Books is presented by Sakline. Honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Sakline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit sakline.com or email info@sakline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Sakline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.